Dicen que en la plaza en estos días se les ha visto cabalgar a Camilo y a Martí, y delante de la caravana, lentamente sin jinete, un caballo para ti.
Vuelven las heridas que nos sanan de los hombres y mujeres que no te dejaremos ir. Hoy el corazón nos late afuera y tu pueblo, aunque le duela, no te quiere despedir.
Hombre, los agradecidos te acompañan. ¿Cómo anhelaremos tus hazañas? Ni la muerte cree que se apoderó de ti. Hombre, aprendimos a saberte eterno, así como lo vi Jesucristo. No hay un solo altar sin una luz por ti.
Hoy no quiero decirte, comandante, ni barbudo ni gigante, todo lo que sé de ti. Hoy quiero gritarte, Padre mío, no te sueltes de mi mano, aún no sé andar bien sin ti.
Hombre, los agradecidos te acompañan. ¿Cómo anhelaremos tus hazañas? Ni la muerte cree que se apoderó de ti. Hombre, aprendimos a saberte eterno, así como lo vi Jesucristo. No hay un solo altar sin una luz por ti. Hombre, los agradecidos te acompañan. ¿Cómo anhelaremos tus hazañas? Ni la muerte cree que se apoderó de ti. Hombre, aprendimos a saberte eterno, así como lo vi Jesucristo. No hay un solo altar sin una luz por ti.
Dicen que en la plaza esta mañana ya no caben más corceles llegando de otro confín. Una multitud desesperada de héroes de espaldas aladas que se han dado cita aquí. Y delante de la caravana, lentamente sin jinete, un caballo para ti.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings, greetings. My name is Onya Sanu. I am a cadre with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is my comrade Monica, also with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and this is Weekly Pan-African News. This is our weekly show that we do every single Thursday at this time, 12 p.m. Mountain Time. We started doing it at the beginning of the pandemic back in March because we were like, damn, this is killing African people. We can no longer do in-person events, but we still got to talk to our people. We still got to build with our people. So how are we going to do it? We're going to do it online. We're going to do it virtually. And so every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time for about 60 to 90 minutes, we cover a different political education topic from a revolutionary Pan-African perspective. Good morning to Mac and to Erica, two of my comrades on Hood Communists. Shout out to Hood Communists. We published new articles today. Check them out. But on this show, well, first of all, let me give you some context about the APRP. You might already know, you might not if you're watching for the first time, so let's get some context. The All African People's Revolutionary Party, or the AAPRP, is a revolutionary Pan-African socialist political party founded in Africa by Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah was the first democratically elected president of the first African nation to gain independence from colonialism. The nation was Ghana. But then after Ghana gained its independence, on its very first Independence Day, Kwame Nkrumah gave a speech where he said the independence of Ghana is meaningless without the total liberation and independence and unification of the African continent and the African diaspora. And the reason why Kwame Nkrumah said that is because he understood that one decolonized African nation surrounded by a colonized African continent could not hope to keep its liberation for the long term. It's just not going to happen. The only way that African people are going to realize our liberation once and for all, the only way we are going to achieve self-determination once and for all, is if all of Africa, the entire African continent, is unified, socialist, and free. And so that is the political objective of our organization, the AAPRP, or the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. When Africa is free, African people everywhere will be free, and that is what we are fighting to do. That is what all of our work is working towards. So that's us. And this is our show, Weekly Pan-African News. And we do two things at the beginning of every single show. The first thing that we always do is we call in an ancestor, a revolutionary ancestor. And the reason why we do that is because we understand as revolutionary African women that we are part of a continuum of struggle that began centuries ago. It began the very first moment, the very first colonizers set foot on the shores of Africa with the intent to steal. Our people have been fighting back continuously since that moment. We actually murked that very first European colonizer, and we've been fighting back for centuries ever since.
Hold on real quick. I think they said they can't hear you.
Ooh. Can you hear us? Erica and Matt, can you hear me? It looks like my mic is working. Good morning, Prudence. Comrade, another comrade in the APRP. Good morning. Can y'all hear us? Can you hear me? Are my lips moving, but no words are coming out? Is he? Oh,
I could hear you. Just
okay.
I just, and I could hear you. So
Okay, sweet.
I hope it might just be it might be just their connection.
Okay, cool. Thanks, comrades, for helping us with the technical issues. We are learning on the fly how to use these platforms. We very often make mistakes, but you are patient with us and we appreciate you. But yeah, if you have any issues hearing me, if my mouth is just like moving and you can't say anything, then by all means, please let us know in the comments and we'll try to address the issue. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so at the beginning of every show, what we do is two things. First thing is that we call in an ancestor. We call in an ancestor because we understand that we are part of a continuum of struggle that began the very first moment the very first colonizer set foot on the shores of Africa. We understand that we would not be here speaking to y'all and doing this work if not for the efforts of our ancestors. And so we would be remiss. Oh, thank you, folks confirming that they can hear us. We appreciate you. We appreciate it. So yeah, we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the folks that came before us, the folks that laid the groundwork for the work that we're doing today. We would not be here talking to you without our ancestors. And so we must acknowledge them. We must lift them up. So the ancestor that we want to call in today, there's actually two of them, two very special ancestors that we want to call in today. The first is Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston. If you took an AP English class or read the classics while you were in school, then you are probably familiar with that name. She is most famous for writing "Their eyes were
Dicen que en la plaza en estos días se les ha visto cabalgar a Camilo y a Martí.
Hello, greetings. Thank y'all for helping us work through these technical issues. We were having, I think, connection speed issues that made the stream choppy. So we just started it again. I see a nice green connection. And so I'm hoping that these issues are now resolved. But please continue to communicate with us in the chat so we can see if we can resolve these things. Technology, y'all, technology. All right, where was I? Okay, so let's talk about Zora Neale Hurston, author of Their Wives Are Watching God, African anthropologist, revolutionary African woman who passed away on this day in 1960. We want to lift up her name today on the anniversary of her passing. Zora Neale Hurston is the first ancestor that we're going to call in. And then the second ancestor we want to call in is Jose Marti. Jose Marti. And you might have heard Zora Neale Hurston's name before, but I would not be surprised if you did not know who Jose Marti was. He was born on this day in 1853. He was a Cuban poet, philosopher, writer, professor, and publisher. And he is also known as the father of the Cuban independence movement. He is quite literally considered one of the ideological fathers of the entire movement for Cuban liberation. I'm not talking about the Cuban Revolution that Fidel Castro and Che Guevara led. I'm talking about when Cuba was fighting against Spain and then the United States for its independence as a nation. The anti-colonial struggles that preceded the socialist Cuban Revolution. Jose Marti is the ideological father of those struggles, a Cuban national hero because of his role in the liberation of Cuba from Spanish colonialism. He was a revolutionary philosopher, a political theorist, someone who theorized about how Cuba must develop its own national identity in order to win its independence from the Spanish Empire. Without Jose Marti, there would never have been a Cuban revolution. Also, it says that no one's on the stream, so I can't tell if y'all can actually see us. I see Max saying it's good. Actually, no. I think there's like good. There's 25 people watching.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think it just bumped back up just now.
Nice. Okay, yeah. So Jose Marti, father of the Cuban independence movement, grandfather of the Cuban Revolution, a person who was foundational to what the Cuban Revolution became. And so we want to honor Zora Neale Hurston and Jose Marti as the revolutionary ancestors on the show this week. Man, we're going to keep it going. We're having technical difficulties, but y'all are here with us. And so we're going to keep going for you. The other thing that we do at the top of every show is that we want to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. The entirety of the Western Hemisphere was stolen from hundreds of indigenous nations that were just out here thriving, living their lives, trading with each other, working with the land, just being chill until European colonizers came and stole their land and imposed capitalism, imposed settler colonialism, and took it. And so this land that we are speaking to y'all on is known as Albuquerque by the colonizers, but it actually belongs to the Tiwa Pueblo. The Tiwa folks are still here, and this is still their land. And so when we do land acknowledgements in the APRP, we are not just saying, oh, this is your land, thanks. No, we are saying, this is your land. This will always be your land. And you are going to get your land back. Just like we are fighting for Africa back, just like Palestinians are fighting for Palestine back, just like the indigenous people of Australia and New Zealand are fighting for their land back, indigenous nations of the Western Hemisphere, including the Tiwa Nation, will get their land back. When we say land back in the APRP, that is not a metaphor. We are speaking literally. Colonized nations that saw their land stolen so that capitalism could spread across the world will fight to win our land back. And if that makes you feel any kind of way, you better get on the right side of history or lose what you got. Anyway, the other thing that we do every show, we open with the land acknowledgement. We tell you who you are or who we are. We call in an ancestor, and then we move on to the next section of the show, which is political education. Political education. And the reason why we engage in political education on this show is because we understand that we cannot hope to organize our people for liberation unless our people understand exactly why we are oppressed, unless our people understand exactly who that enemy is. And political education is how our people develop that analysis. The APRP's primary work is political education and propaganda. You will not attend an APRP event anywhere in the world, whether it be in Ghana, Tanzania, St. Vincent, Albuquerque, or beyond, without getting this component of political education. It is the most important part of our work because capitalism and imperialism and colonialism spread so much confusion. So much confusion. They work overtime to misdirect us and confuse us and keep us in the dark about what's actually happening and why. And so we engage in revolutionary political education to give our people the tools and analysis they need to recognize the system for what it is, and also to learn how they can tear it down as a collective. That is why we do political education. We do it every single show, every single event. And this week, we have a very exciting topic to discuss, something that is very important in this particular political moment, especially as we see the US empire continuing to toss our people crumbs and symbolism instead of actually addressing our needs. The PE topic this week is why representation is a trap. Why representation is a trap. First, let's start off by defining what we mean by representation. When we say representation, we mean the idea that African people can be given positions of leadership and visibility within the capitalist, imperialist, settler colonial system, and have that be used as a means to advance us toward liberation. An example of this is the Biden administration's recent announcement. They're going to put our ancestor Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. So this is happening within a context in this country in which African people are disproportionately dying from the COVID-19 pandemic because we are living in underdeveloped communities without access to healthcare. The healthcare we do have access to is racist. We don't have stable housing. We very rarely have stable employment. We certainly do not have healthcare. And so we are dying in disproportionate numbers during this pandemic, while also simultaneously either being forced to work in unsafe conditions or having no access to employment and therefore no means to pay for our housing or our food. So we are in dire straits. We were in fact in dire straits before the pandemic, thanks to the intentional structure of the United States that was built on our back. So all of this is happening. And in this context, the Biden administration says, you know what? You know what's going to help you? We're going to slap Harriet Tubman on a piece of currency. And Harriet Tubman was a woman who in life was considered contraband by the US government. She was literally considered to be stolen property. They did not consider her to be a free human being. They considered her to be property that stole itself. They spent decades trying to stop this woman from liberating her people. They spent decades demonizing her and hunting her down with bounty killers. So in her life, she was not celebrated by this empire, despite the work she did to liberate her people. And now in death, as the very same empire that declared her contraband is exploiting and oppressing her people to this day, that empire says, in order to help her people, we're gonna put her on a fucking piece of money. That's supposed to be for us? You called her stolen property in life, and now you're gonna put her on a $20 bill, and that's supposed to honor her and help us? That makes no sense. But that is the logic of representation. Representation says that a system that is fundamentally anti-African, because it has been built on a foundation of exploiting and enslaving Africa and African people, could somehow be fixed by just slapping us into positions within it. So Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill is a particularly exalting example of the politics of representation. The elevation of Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor, to the vice presidency of the United States is another example of the politics of representation. One thing to understand about the job of a prosecutor in a settler state is that your job when you are in that position is to criminalize and oppress and dehumanize African and indigenous and colonized peoples. When people defend Kamala Harris by saying like she did her job, it's important to understand that her job was to go for niggas. Like her job was to lock us up. Her job was to criminalize us. Like she could not have done that job without agreeing to attack her people. That is how she got that title. That is how she made it to vice president. So understanding that Kamala Harris was elevated to that position because she agreed to attack her own people as a weapon of a settler state, how is it that her elevation to the vice presidency of that empire could be considered a victory for us? She only got to where she was by fucking with us. But again, that is the logic of the politics of representation. Monica, would you add anything?
Yes, I can. On top of, so Kamala Harris being celebrated, not only is it just makes me want to throw up, like her reputation speaks for itself. So people cannot say, well, she didn't know any better. She was doing her job. Wrong. There are so many people in the community that continuously tried to work with her and she didn't want to. She supported three strikes. She supported it. She loved it. When a program tried to happen on releasing people who are have felony records early, she was like, no, I do not support that. That would deplete prisons, basically making money off them. And we wouldn't have anybody to fight wildfires. Like she was for our people being locked up and tremendously contributed to it. And she was proud of it. She nicknamed herself Top Cop. Nobody gave her that name but herself. So she continuously supported laws that would criminalized. Also for three strikes rules, just so y'all know, our people are 12 times more likely, of course, to be incarcerated because of three strikes. Also, she supported the death penalty. We know innocent people, millions and millions are, well, not millions, but tons of people who are on death row and thousands of people are innocent who are killed and murdered. So she did not at any time try to pass policies. And by the way, the DA's role is huge. It's one of the most powerful roles. So she could have taken, there are some progressive prosecutors that do a lot of restorative justice. And it doesn't mean that they're not still locking up our people, but she didn't take any stance at all. She wanted to be tough on crime. She was known for being tough on crime. She loved it. She celebrated. She even laughed about it. Like you could see her interviews. She even laughed about it. All this stuff is documented. And so when she's being celebrated as the first African vice president and it's seeming like a victory, like how is it a victory when she continuously created harm on our people? Like, do y'all not get that? She created harm on our people. Do you know what that does when our people are locked up? She was pro-slavery. That's what she is. She's pro-slavery. And people continuously told her about what incarceration is. And she, like, her career just skyrocketed because of her tough on crime, and her being of African descent. Being tough on crime is really what made her famous in her career also. So she should never be celebrated. And for people to think that she's going to bring about change, like when she didn't bring about change in one of the most like prestigious roles that she could have, that could have really helped our people, how is she going to bring change as a vice president? It makes no sense. She's literally going to do the exact same thing that she did in her previous role. So nope, she shouldn't be celebrated. It's neoliberalism at its finest. And she also uses like civil rights language to bring people in, with the hope that will never happen. We don't want hope. We want policy change, which will never happen. So we just want it all to be abolished.
And we have folks in the comments like listing additional crimes of Kamala Harris. Now, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, people say she didn't know any better is for things like fucking for recipe, not systematically ruining lives. That is Prudence, a comrade in the APRP. That's correct. When people give the excuse that folks in positions of power just don't know any better, they need to be taught, I'm like, they shouldn't have that job then? Like, I don't have time to, what are you, like why are we making excuses for them not knowing basic information about how they're harming people? But also, I don't think that's the case for Kamala Harris. I think Kamala Harris knows precisely who she was harming and did so intentionally because she wanted to rise up through the hierarchy of this settler state. And she understood the way to do that was to attack African, indigenous, colonized, trans people, sex workers. She went for the most marginalized segments of this society because she knew that's how you build power in this society. I think that was intentional. Personally, I'm not giving her the benefit of the doubt about that. Erica from Hood Communist also pointing out that Kamala Harris is responsible for introducing the SESTA and FOSTA bill. The SESTA and FOSTA bill, of course, made conditions much more dangerous for sex workers, criminalized them, took down Backpage and forced them back onto the street to be killed. That was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. And it's not like there wasn't like a massive national campaign to attempt to intervene when these bills were introduced. Like sex workers and their allies around the country were like, for the love of God, do not do this. This will put us in danger. And Kamala Harris ignored that campaign and made it made the SESTA and FOSTA bill a cornerstone of her legacy, despite the fact that people were trying to tell her not to do this. Because it's not that she doesn't know better, it's that she's calculating what it's going to take for her to rise up through the levels of the hierarchy of the center state government. What else? Erica saying she supported prison labor, absolutely correct. Like Monica said, she didn't want to reform that in any way in California because she was worried they wouldn't have forced labor to fight forest fires. California is on fire for like most of the year at this point, and there is no long-term plan to deal with that, but she wanted to make sure that there was a ready supply of enslaved people to fight those fires, but they're not doing anything to stop from happening.
And then when they come out, don't qualify for that job to be a firefighter after being paid $1 an hour or whatever slave wages they're paying people.
Yes. She also declined to prosecute Steve Mnuchin. Comrade saying she also put trans women in men's prisons. Correct. She did that. Prudence is saying we need to off Kamala. Shout out to Prudence. When we say off, we mean take her out of her position thanks to a revolutionary struggle. We're going to say that. But yeah, so Kamala Harris, although she is an African woman, she occupies my same identity. But what we do not have is shared politics. We do not have a shared vision of how the world can be changed. We do not even have a shared set of morals, because I would never in my entire life take the job of a prosecutor because I understand what that job is going to require, attacking my own people. Kamala Harris is like, I accept that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this job where the entire job description is attacking my own people and the most oppressed people, and I'm going to do that job extremely well. She was down with that. And then now she's in the office of the vice president, and the whole purpose of the presidential administration of an empire is to uphold that empire. It's to spread its influence across the world. It's to help it to steal more land and resources and exploit more people. That's the whole reason why the presidency exists. It's just a figurehead for a genocidal thieving empire. So she signed up for that job too. She was like, I'll be on top of this genocidal thieving empire. I'll use my identity to give it like a whitewashing. What do you think?
No, and that's why she's the perfect candidate. That's why she was the perfect candidate. It was strategic for them. It wasn't just strategic that she was African. It's strategic that she is down with this empire. She is down to oppress her own people. She is down to harm her own people. So they don't even have to like whitewash it. They don't have to do anything with it because it's all there, you know, and she can do it with a smile and be a symbolism for us, but never represent us, right? Just in her morals and values, and even not in her actions. Her actions speak it all. She couldn't even do the smallest of actions, right? Like body cameras, nope. 3 strikes laws, nope. Anything that oppressed our people and our people called attention to it, she was like, no, I want to keep it as is and I want to make it worse. So she even made conditions worse for trans women. She made conditions worse for our people by locking them up. And she did it, and she did it with a smile, and she's going to do it as vice president with a little smile too.
And this is the thing, right? This is why this is a problem. This is why we have to reject the politics of representation, meaning politics that say that representation for us within a capitalist system is somehow victory for us. Because these people are not advancing the condition of African people. Kamala Harris being vice president is not going to do jack shit for us. And also, arguably, it's going to make our conditions worse. Kamala Harris is far from the only example of these politics of representation. We talked about Harriet Tubman's $20 bill. There's also the very first African Secretary of Defense that was confirmed by the Senate recently. People are looking at this man who previously worked for Raytheon as a missile contractor selling weapons to the US government, who is now in charge of the entire defense apparatus of the US government. No conflict of interest there, I guess. But so people are looking at this very first African man in the position of the Secretary of Defense and saying, oh, this is a remarkable advancement for African people. But what is the defense arm of the US empire currently engaged in? Well, they are drastically escalating their military footprint on the African continent. They are engaging in a recolonization of Africa through Africom, the US military's Africa Command. And now the person in charge of Africom is an African person in the United States. Do you think he is going to use that position to decolonize in Africa because he is African? Or is he going to use that position and his identity to whitewash what the US empire is doing to give it a built-in rationalization for colonization? This is what we have to understand when they elevate people that look like us into these positions. They're not doing it to help us. They're doing it to cover up for what they're doing. If you go back to how Africom even became a thing, it's very, very, very clear. We talked about it before. Africom first was initiated during the last term of George W. Bush. That was when it first became a thing, the last year of his last term. And then it was drastically expanded under the first African president of the United States, Barack Obama. Why did it go down like that? Well, because if George W. Bush had said, we want to open 46 military bases in Africa, we want to start drone bombing Somalia and Tanzania and Kenya.
Oh, Onyesawu, it lost sound.
Talking for like 30 minutes. Okay, so, oh my goodness. Sorry, I have to mute in 2 places so there's no echo. And sometimes I forget to unmute in the second place. So we appreciate y'all. So yeah, what was I saying? Okay, so Kamala Harris, right? Kamala Harris got to that position first as prosecutor, then as attorney general, and now as vice president because she agreed to help this system attack her own people. Although she occupies my same identity, she does not represent my interests or the interests of African people as a whole. Her place in that position does not advance our struggle in any way, shape, or form, nor is she seeking to do that. Like, because she's been asked directly. People have been like, are you going to do anything specifically for African people? And Kamala Harris is like, no, I'm not going to do anything specifically for African people. Because Kamala Harris is most interested in advancing the interests of the ruling class and the interests of the US empire as a whole. That is why she is in these positions, because she believes in the mythology of the United States. She believes in the hegemony of this empire. And you cannot believe in the hegemony of the US empire if you also believe in African liberation. Those are not 2 compatible positions. But it's very important to understand that Kamala Harris is a symptom of a larger problem. She is far from the only person, African person, being used in this way. She's just one of the most recent examples. For example, the latest Secretary of Defense of the United States, who was just confirmed by the Senate last week, is an African man. In fact, the very first African man to serve in that position. I'm trying to look up his stupid ass name. It's like Mike something. But he's the very, very first African man to serve as Secretary of Defense. He was confirmed by the Senate. He was, prior to occupying that position, literally a missile contractor with Raytheon, meaning that his job was to sell the US government weapons. And now he is in charge of the entire defense apparatus of the US government. That to me is a very obvious conflict of interest, but that is typically how things work in the empire. They don't care if you were like working for the corporation they were trying to regulate yesterday. They want you in that position today because it's not about equality. It's not about fairness. It's not about being rational. It's about upholding the power of the bourgeois of the empire. So this first African man has been confirmed as Secretary of Defense. People are like, this is historic for African people. This represents like a very big step for us. But we already know that this man is not going to do anything for us. And in fact, his identity is going to be used to rationalize the actions of this empire. What do I mean by that? It's Michael Lloyd Austin. Or no, his name is Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin. I didn't even remember. I really thought his name was Mike. It's because I truly don't care. And he's an asshole. But, so what I mean by that, how is his identity going to be used by this empire to rationalize what it's doing, to cover what it's doing? Well, right now, there is a massive U.S. military project in Africom, known as Africom, the U.S. Military's Africa Command. It represents 46 military bases, thousands of troops and contractors, all working with neocolonial governments on the continent in the so-called name of counterterrorism, but in reality to ensure that the U.S. government retains free access to African land, labor, and resources. That is the true purpose of Africom, no matter what anyone tells you. And now we have a situation with Lloyd Austin, this first African Secretary of Defense for the U.S. empire, being directly in charge of the U.S. military's footprint in Africa, being directly in charge of the U.S. empire's attempt to recolonize Africa. An African person is in charge of the U.S. empire's attempt to colonize Africa. Do you think Lloyd Austin is going to use that position to decolonize Africa? Do you think Lloyd Austin is going to use that position to advance the interests of African people in Africa? Absolutely not. Lloyd Austin is most interested in advancing the interests of the empire that he served, first in the private sector, now in the public sector. He is going to use his identity as the first African man in this position to provide a cover for recolonization of his ancestral homeland. That is bananas. That is the kind of African that is produced by indoctrination into capitalism and colonialism. People like Kamala Harris, people like Lloyd Austin, people like Barack Obama. Because let me tell you something about Africom. Africom first became a U.S. military project in the last year of George W. Bush's second term. That is when Africom was first introduced as a campaign of the U.S. government. But though it was introduced in the last year of George W. Bush's second term, it was drastically expanded under the presidential administration of the first African president of the United States, Barack Obama. Why do you think it is that though Africom was introduced under Bush, it only became its current state under Obama? The reason for that is that if George W. Bush, with his affected cowboy exterior and his ridiculous cowboy hat and his racism, had said, we want to open some military bases in Africa, African people, both in the continent and in the United States, would have said, the hell you will. We will not allow that to happen. We will not allow this racist ass cowboy to build military bases on the motherland. We would not have allowed it to happen. African people around the world openly opposed George W. Bush because we understood clearly what he represented and we understood clearly what a threat he was to us. Clearly. But then when Barack Obama came into office, he looked like us. He tried to sound like us. He pretended to be of us. Although if you look into Barack Obama's background, he has no relationship whatsoever to the conditions of African people in the United States. That man grew up in Indonesia with a maid staff. Like, he is not working class. He has never been working class. He has always been wealthy and privileged and separated from African people. He has never been of us. But he used the fact that he looked like us, and he used like some weird anthropological analysis of African culture to pretend to be us. And he won our trust because we thought that he was us. And he used that trust to drastically expand the U.S. military's footprint in Africa. I argue that he's the only person that could have done that. Because even Bill Clinton, we would have been like, what on earth are you doing? If Bill Clinton had said, we want to open up 46 military bases in Africa, George W. Bush would have been like, hell no. But Barack Obama telling us to pull our pants up, Barack Obama and African churches trying to speak like MLK, Barack Obama said we're going to open up military bases in Africa to fight terrorism. And we were like, word. That makes sense to me, because we thought that he was one of us. And this is the threat of the politics of representation, because the people that make it to these positions are never there to serve our interests. They would not be in that position if they were. They are only there so their identity can be weaponized against our struggle for liberation. So their identity can be weaponized in order to allow colonialism to retain control of us. These people are not on our side, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their family history, because, you know, Barack Obama was privileged from way back. Barack Obama had maids growing up and all kinds of bullshit. Barack Obama had no connection to African culture until he met Michelle. But Lloyd Austin grew up in the Jim Crow South, lived through segregation, saw the impact of colonialism on his people in the United States, and still ended up where he is now. So we have to understand that shared identity, shared history, shared culture is not enough. It is not enough. As soon as these people occupy these positions within these institutions that are built on exploitation, we have to understand that they are not there to help us. They cannot. They would not. No one is ever going to make it to the US presidency who actually has decolonization as a priority. It's not going to happen, because this empire can only exist on a foundation of colonialism. That's the only way. It's the only way. And they're only going to allow people in leadership within it who are going to uphold that mission. The facts. So yeah, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Lloyd Austin, Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice, Colin Powell, Clarence Thomas, Eric is pointing out, had a whole Geechee family. African as it gets, still turned out to be a sellout, because it is not reliable. Like, shared identity, culture, background is not a reliable indicator of anything. You have to look at the politics. You have to look at the background. You have to look at the actions.
Speaking of the Rices, because there's a question in the comment about them, what's the difference between how community views Condoleezza Rice versus Susan Rice? Do you think it's administration based?
Yeah, I think so. Because Condoleezza Rice first served in the Obama administration in his cabinet. And Susan Rice is a piece of shit. Susan Rice was one of the architects of the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya that turned that nation into a failed state. Susan Rice helped the expansion of Africom on the African continent. Susan Rice has been engaged in the work of counterterrorism, which is really work of oppressing and dehumanizing colonized people. So Susan Rice is a piece of shit. But Susan Rice served in the Obama administration, and like I just explained, Obama weaponized his identity against us to get us on our side, only to harm us. And so people will see people like Susan Rice associate with Obama and assume she's on her side, because they have not yet processed that Obama himself is not on her side. Condoleezza Rice, on the other hand, served in the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration. So Condoleezza Rice was there for all of the shit show, like for Katrina, for the lies leading up to the war in Iraq, for all the fuck shit that George W. Bush did that we're all very clear was messed up. The problem in US politics is that we have this false dichotomy between the Republican and the Democratic Party, where everybody understands, well, everybody who's not openly racist understands that the Republicans suck. Like everybody gets it. Like, they're like, those people suck. Very clear. But very few people understand that the Democrats suck just as hard. Just as hard. And so when a Democratic administration comes into office, we see a lot of people that previously had an oppositional posture to a Republican administration move towards this conciliatory position where they're let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's work for them. They're trying their best. They're basically good people, because they do not understand that these parties serve the same master, and that master is not us. They think the Democrats can be reasoned with. They think the Democrats have good intentions. And so people like Susan Rice get to fly under the radar because they work for Democratic administrations, despite the fact that they are helping to exploit and oppress and colonize their people. Susan Rice is a piece of shit. Just point blank. piece of fucking shit. And she's back in the Biden administration in a completely unaccountable domestic policy role. She was also recently declared like race czar. I don't know what the fuck that is, race czar. And she's going to use that domestic policy position to advance strategies of counterinsurgency that are going to target radical African people. Like Susan Rice is coming for us because Susan Rice is a piece of shit. But Susan Rice gets a pass because Susan Rice works in a Democratic administration. People are upholding this false dichotomy between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's confusing the issue to an extreme degree. It was the Obama administration that overthrew a democratically elected president in Honduras and created an immigration crisis that persists to this day. It was the Obama administration that lynched Gaddafi and made Libya a failed state with open-air slave auctions that persist to this day. It was the Obama administration that helped the Clintons exploit Haiti and overthrew another democratically elected president in that country. It was the Obama administration that did all of these things with Susan Rice up in there. And the Obama administration gets no smoke because people think the Democrats are on our side. So I absolutely think that the reason why everybody understands that Condoleezza Rice sucks, but very few people understand that Susan Rice sucks, is because of this false dichotomy that people have between the Republicans and the Democrats. And then also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, like, I rarely hear about Susan Rice. I barely even understood the role that she played until you just now broke it down. But Condoleezza Rice, I definitely know her track record. And look at me, who's knowledgeable in this area. And I barely, like you said, she's flying on the radar. She flew on the radar for me too. So now I got to, somebody else, I get to go research and see how trashy she is. But you're right. Like, this like false dichotomy of like, even I think maybe like 3 years ago is when I really started learning about what the Obama administration did. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I didn't know. I didn't know. And that's done purposely because there's this conditioning of like, when a Democrat's in office, it's better. And it's not better. It's the same system. It's the same thing, two different wings working together, never for our people, never for colonized people. And so it's so critical that when we look at people in their role, look at their actions. Like, I think in the comments, it says, and destabilizing the Congo too. I wasn't sure which Rice did that, but everything that continuously happens in this country here, or happens in Africa or in other places, it happens because the empire wants it to happen. And in no way, shape, or form is anybody in any of those roles ever trying to stop it. This is why even Bernie Sanders' watered down version of socialism could never happen. Bernie Sanders could never get elected because some of the things that he's talking about, if it's really grounded in true socialism, it wouldn't last. It couldn't happen in a capitalist society. Why would this country want everyone to have free healthcare when they benefit from us dying, when they benefit from us being exploited? We can't even get something as simple as healthcare. That should be a right for people to have access to free healthcare. So none of the things that can happen, anything that's going to help people and uplift people will not happen in this society. Never, ever, ever. That's why we're revolutionists.
And Susan Rice has flown under the radar for a long time. But I strongly suspect that a lot of us are going to learn who she is quite soon because she has plans for us. She has plans for us, and they are not good. But yeah, so Susan Rice, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Lloyd Austin, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, Clarence Thomas, all of these Africans that occupy positions of leadership and visibility within the government, within the U.S. empire, have never been in those positions to serve our interests. They're in the position to serve the interests of this empire, and the interests of this empire diametrically opposed to ours. This empire wants to recolonize Africa. They want to steal African land and resources, and we should be opposing that because that is our land and those are our resources. They want to steal it and use it to build weapons and keep capitalism going and exploit us and oppress us. That is what they are using these people for. And I also want to say specifically that African women in particular are being used in this way. You could see it very clearly during Biden's inauguration. They had that sister, Amanda Gorman, reading that poem about how US is imperfect. We have to work together to make it good. No, they had, Kamala Harris there, getting sworn in to be vice president of the empire, giving it a nice facelift, like a rebranding, while the fundamental relationship to African people remains unchanged. They had Michelle Obama. She did look fly. That was a good blowout. I will admit that. But they had Michelle Obama there hugging on George W. Bush and just showing up and looking like elegant and beautiful in order to elevate the image of the empire. That shit, I was like, they have African women all up in this inauguration to celebrate this open segregationist. Like, Joe Biden worked with segregationists to like fight school desegregation. Joe Biden is like an architect of mass incarceration. Joe Biden is an architect of Plan Colombia to recolonize Central and South America. Joe Biden is like a to the bone racist man. Like, he does not care for African and colonized people. It's quite obvious. It's quite obvious. And they still surrounded him by African women. And those African women chose to be there. And that, I don't even, like, I see that and I have like this really intense sense of dread because I see a growing number of African women, like particularly petty bourgeois African women in academia and like in the nonprofit industry and like in all these like sectors agreeing to help this empire rebrand itself. And when I say rebrand, I mean they're like changing the skin, but underneath it's still genocidal and racist. These African women are willingly agreeing to play that role. Historically speaking, we have been among the most oppressed sectors of our people. We have been exploited and raped and oppressed. We have had our children taken from us. We have had our lands destroyed. We have been like put in this position where we are disrespected to uplift this empire, and we are willingly helping it to rebrand itself. Dozens of us, hundreds, if you look at like the entire nonprofit sector, thousands. And I'm like, what are we doing? They're using us and we're letting them use us. Kwame Ture, when he was in SNCC, had a quote where he was like, this entire government from top to bottom is anti-Black. And that means that any African person that agrees to serve in this government is therefore anti-Black. He was like, that's it, that's all. So if we look at these women agreeing to let themselves be used to rebrand this empire, what conclusion must we draw about their politics? People present like folks like Amanda Gorman and her Prada coat, people like Michelle Obama, people like Kamala Harris, they present them to me in these positions and they say, this is who you should aspire to be. This is who you should look up to. This is the goal for you. And I say that I am disgusted by the sight of these people. I am disgusted at the thought of these women because it is not acceptable to me for anyone to fight for a position of leadership that requires in that fight that they agree to oppress and exploit their own people. These women are doing that to us and they are being celebrated because of their identities. And that's fucking gross. It's gross. The only reason they got to that position in the first place is because they are willing to sell out every single other person that shares their intersection. That's the only reason. They are literally helping a white supremacist, genocidal, racist as fuck to the bone empire rebrand itself so it can be more effectively racist and genocidal and white supremacist and spread across the world like a motherfucking disease. They're helping it to do that at our expense. What kind, like, how is that heroic? Why is that something to aspire to? Why should I look up to that? Why should we turn to little African girls and be like, this is positive for you? No, that's gross. Like, I have nothing else to say. Like, yes, Erica, it was a Prada quote. It was a Prada coat. And you know what? The coat was not donated. Amanda Gorman, the yellow coat she wore at the inauguration was a Prada coat that she already owned because she had previously worked with Prada. That girl got a grant from the Kellogg Foundation. When I first heard that she was reading at the inauguration, I was like, oh, that's fucked up, but it's like an African girl with talent, I guess, whatever. But she wasn't just like a random working class African girl. She was already like integrated into these circles with the Kellogg Foundation, with the nonprofit industrial complex, with these neoliberals. Like, she was already there working with Prada. That's where they found her. So they're elevating these women that are choosing women and girls. Because that girl is under 18. Like, they're starting so young. They're elevating these women that are choosing a path in life that is at odds with the long-term liberation of their people. They are actively choosing this. And that is why they're being elevated to these positions. It's just like, man, people, there's like that hashtag listen to Black women, right? That people, a very particular kind of African women spread. And it was like, they're just like all these petty bourgeois African women are weaponizing the identity of African and women to defend imperialism and capitalism. They are allowing themselves to be used like that. And I feel like we have to separate the identity of African women from these politics. We have to recognize the politics that are being advanced with these identity politics, these narrow ass identity politics. And I feel like, do not lump me in with someone like Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris is the antithesis of everything that I believe. Kamala Harris only exists because she stepped on a pile of African women's corpses. Like, it's just, like, I feel like I'm not even being articulate because it bothers me so much that we are being used in this way and allowing ourselves to be used in this way. And I feel like it's up to us. Like, it has to be revolutionary African women and non-men that call that shit out. Because these people weaponize their identity to not only help this empire, but to also shield themselves from criticism. I've seen so many people say, don't attack Kamala Harris. Don't criticize Michelle Obama. They're African women, and African women are all attacked misogynoir. I've seen them use the concept of misogynoir. I've seen them use it to defend themselves.
Everybody's open for critique. Why would I not critique somebody who's trying to continue to oppress my people? That makes no sense. And that whole listen to Black women, listen to African women, like that makes them pile us in to those same categories, because it's like all Black women are right. No, have some analysis, wake up, have some consciousness, and see not everything that's being said is about the empowerment or the liberation of our people. So no, don't listen to all Black women. Listen to political education and have your own analysis and be informed. Be informed. That's what you have to do. And so I would just want to just add, like, the reason why this is so dangerous is because our people want to assimilate into this country and be in harmony with this country. I don't ever want to be associated with this country. Like the genocide, the cruelty, everything that they do is to create harm, strategic harm, and to capitalize on that harm, to make millions and millions and billions and trillions. The dangers of it is people will strive to be a Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
People will sell out our people. Like, you know that saying, not all skin folk are kinfolk. It's real. Like, that's what y'all need to be saying instead of listen to Black women. That's what you need to be saying and realize, like, I think about, I'm reflecting on, like when Obama was in office. This is Monica, long time ago, Monica, before I was really learning more about like consciousness. Like, I always knew like the system wasn't for us. And then, you know, I voted for Obama, and then I got to go to Washington, D.C. I took some young people there, and I had my son, and he had his little tan suit and looked like, he was like, I look like the president. And now, like I think he was like 5, you know, now 5 years later, my son is not striving to be that. Like, he understands how the hurt and harm, like, it directly impacts him. Like, police brutality directly impacts him. Capitalism directly impacts him. And we can have these deep conversations together. And I'm just so thrilled that we're having this conversation now, because Black History Month is in February, and all of these people that we just named are going to be celebrated by this empire, and we have to squash it and shut it down right away. Call them out for what they do to our people. Just speak the facts. Like, just speak the facts about what they're doing, so people are more informed, so they don't uplift the Kamala Harrises and they uplift what this government is actually doing to people. And like, you going all the way back to what you talked about with Biden trying to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Repeatedly, every time there are uprisings, repeatedly, every time when people are, the chatter is they want to fight back. The chatter is they want to change. They try to just please people with crumbs. Like, this is intentional. This is not new. It's not new that there are segments of Africans who are winning in certain positions as they're running for office. That's not new. That happens because then it's like, oh, we've gotten a few more of us in there. Let's stop organizing. And so what it does is it distracts us. It's a distraction. All of it is a distraction. Like, it's going to be a distraction, and we're going to see that during Black History Month. It's going to be a distraction. We have to disrupt every single time and shut it down. Disrupt, stick to your radical values. Like, why is even it radical to have healthcare? Why is it radical for everyone's needs to be met? Like, that's considered radical. Continue to disrupt and shut it down at all costs.
Ooh. Yeah, 100% agree. We have to like look at the actual actions of these women, not just say, oh, this woman in this position or this African in this position is good for African people just because of their identity, but actually look at their actions and look at the impact on the material conditions of African people and see if it's a positive before you celebrate these people. This is the work that you have to do. Like, African people have to do this work. We have to develop class consciousness. We have to recognize, we have to like live the truth that not all skin folk are kinfolk, and begin to move accordingly, begin to understand who is for us and not for us. And if they're not for us, begin to move collectively to address them. But for non-African people who claim to be on our side, do not elevate the politics of representation. Do not come to me. This has happened to me before. People have come to me and said, well, I understand Kamala Harris is bad. I understand that she gained power by exploiting African people and trans people and harming them. But isn't it positive that that person's in that position? No, it is not. It is negative. They are using her identity to recolonize us. It is bad for us, for people that look like us to occupy those positions, because it keeps us asleep. It keeps us confused. It keeps us chasing after symbols. So if you consider yourself to be a so-called ally to the struggle for African liberation, then you better develop a better analysis of the politics of representation, and you better stop with that shit. Like, it pisses me off. I understand when African people do it because they have worked overtime to make us believe that American history is our history and that the only power we have is seeking change within this system that they built. So I understand why African people hold those politics. It's my responsibility as an African revolutionary to help our people understand that that is not the way. That the only way we have of surviving is to fight this system and build something better. But if you are an ally to the African liberation struggle and you're saying that shit, then you're not actually an ally, because you have no idea what you're talking about. You have no analysis whatsoever of what we're trying to do and why we're oppressed. If you are an ally saying Kamala Harris, an African place in a high place, is positive for African people on its face, you are not an ally to anything, because you don't understand what we're trying to do. Get your life together. Develop an analysis of neocolonialism. Stop pushing that shit. Stop pushing that shit. It be non-African people that like push people like Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama the most. When I see that shit, I get so irritated, like so irritated. Y'all say, well, you're on our side, and you have no idea how we're oppressed. God, y'all. So yes, it's dangerous for precisely what Monica pointed out. They are trying to attempt to sell these symbols. They are trying to attempt to sell these Africans in high positions as advancing our liberation, while at the same time, these Africans are actually fighting against our liberation, are fighting to recolonize Africa. It is dangerous if we accept these symbols, because it's going to lead us to accepting this empire recolonizing us. That is literally what's happening. That is what Africom is. And so we must reject across the board, like entirely, any form of representation that means leadership within capitalism. All of it. All of it. All of it. Fuck this African women CEO shit. Fuck this girl boss shit. Fuck this African, like, you know, military leadership. No. If any part of it means exploiting and oppressing people, if any part of it means stealing land and resources, we do not need representation within it. Period. Period. We must be uncompromising. African liberation cannot mean helping imperialism and helping capitalism. It cannot mean that, because capitalism and imperialism are antithetical to African liberation. They have the counter opposite. So we have to reject any kind of representation within capitalism and imperialism across the board. And instead, we should look to our own history of struggle to be free, for the representation that we need. Because the entire history of the struggle for African liberation that has spanned centuries, it began in the 1400s, y'all, and we have been going continuously ever since and winning. That's the only reason we're still here. It's full of stories of women that look like me, of women that look like Monica, of trans women, of queer women, of fat African women fighting for our people, refusing to compromise with this system and winning. That is the representation we need. Last month, when did we show Sarah Unya? In December, we showed Sarah Unya, right? For the Pan-African film series. And that is the story of a dark-skinned, tall, African woman organizing African nations across her land to fight French imperialism and win. And win. People always say, how come all the leads in these movies that Hollywood produces are like light-skinned African women, and the story itself would be like racist and counter-revolutionary, and we're all upset that the lead was not actually a light-skinned woman? And I'm like, I can actually look at real African history and find all the representation of dark-skinned queer African women that I could hope for, fighting for our people, refusing to compromise, given this system mollywops, winning. That is all I need. And those stories are not told. That system, this system of capitalism and imperialism, intentionally hides those stories from us. They're trying to make us believe that the history of empire is our history. No, we have our own. And it is a proud and beautiful history full of brilliance and struggle. And we have so much that we can still learn from it to this day. And it is all the representation we need. Why the fuck would I need Kamala Harris when I have Fannie Lou Hamer, Miriam Makeba, Zora Neale Hurston, Sarah Unya? Like, why would I need Kamala Harris? Sellout ass Kamala Harris, anti-trans woman Kamala Harris. Why would I need her? I don't need heroes that compromise and sell us out and harm people when I have heroes that refuse to stop fighting for the liberation of their people. I don't need representation like Kamala Harris. I don't need representation like Michelle Obama. Sarah Unya had better hair than Michelle Obama. I don't need Michelle Obama. The empire can keep Michelle Obama. My history is the representation I need. The history of the struggle is the representation I need. And that's why I'm trying to tell you, my people, we do not need these people. We do not need these symbols. We don't need recognition from this empire of our ancestors. We don't need them on the money. We need to understand that we are not of this place. It's not ours. We didn't build this. Well, we built it, but it was like by force. To someone else's racist ass design. But we don't need to have any kind of attachment to this. We don't need recognition from this. We are a proud and beautiful people. Who fucking cares about representation in capitalism when we have representation in the struggle for African liberation? So, what is going to happen if we don't deal with this? What is going to happen for African people if we accept the politics of representation as a substitute for actual strategies of liberation? Well, they're going to keep putting African people in those high-ass positions. Oh, Monica's got to go in 4 minutes. I see. I'm cool with like wrapping up the show if you have to leave. And I'll wrap it up. Cool. All right. I'll make it done by 1:30. Okay, so yeah. So what is going to happen if we don't deal with these politics of representation that are being pushed by capitalism? What's going to happen is they're going to keep putting us in these positions. We're going to get like, a first black. At some point, there's going to be a motherfucking African first for every single position within the U.S. government. At some point, they're going to allow that to happen. They're going to have all these African faces in high-ass places within this empire. They're going to completely reskin it. Like, I saw a CIA recruitment ad that had a natural-haired, dark-skinned African woman talking about we're trying to diversify the CIA, but the CIA, its primary job is still going to be attacking anti-colonial movements, attacking anti-imperialist nations. So they're going to reskin this empire. They're going to paper it over with people that look like us. And the fundamental nature of this empire is going to remain unchanged. The U.S. military and the U.S. government are still going to be engaged in white supremacist and imperialist projects across the world, in Africa, throughout the diaspora, where they're going to be stealing our land, stealing our resources, murdering our people, and exploiting them. They're going to have people that look like us doing it, and they're going to convince us that those people are on our side. That is what's going to happen. They will diversify this whole motherfucking thing if it means they can keep what they have. And the fundamental relationship to us will be unchanged. But we will be so confused about the nature of this place, because the people in power that look like us, that we will be completely demobilized when it comes to fighting it, and they will just kill us the fuck off. That's the worst. Like that's where it's gonna go. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and they're gonna do some of it in front and center, and then they're gonna do a lot of it under the radar. And the people who are calling attention to it under the radar, voices are gonna be more silence and silence and silence, because they're not gonna be publicizing what they're doing. Like every time you see something about Africom, you don't see what we're putting out or what the Black Alliance for Peace is putting out. You don't see that. What you see is that they're addressing terrorism when there actually are the terrorists. So that's what they're going to do. And it benefits them. It benefits them for more and more of us to be in these places of power, because it's perceived power. It's not real power. And there's going to be all the first. It's going to be us. Then they're going to put indigenous people in those first. They're going to do all of that. And they're going to do it all under the radar. And more of our people will be harmed. It's all strategic. They're learning. They have like this playbook, I swear to you, they have it and they're learning and they pull it out. So it's like, people are mobilizing. How do we shut it down? Let's let a few of them in. It's great. Let's have a vice president that's African. Like, I agree. I think you're going to see more first. We're going to see, and it's going to be celebrated versus questioned. Anytime our people are in being elected into these high positions of power, we should always question why, what's their track record. We shouldn't just, I remember Stacey Abrams. I was like, let me go look her up, Oh, damn, she did gerrymandering. Oh, damn, she supported raising scholarships, tuition, not scholarship, GPAs on a certain scholarship that's for the community. Like you start like researching, she supported legislation that would not hold bank executives accountable that did predatory lending. Well, another one, and guess what? I'm not surprised. So we should never see anything at face value, always research it.
100%. At some point, there's going to be like a trans, disabled, African president. They're going to be like, look at this person. And that person is going to use their position to murder trans people around the world. That's what's going to happen. This is what we're leading up to. We have to understand that the face might change, but the fundamental nature of the empire is going to stay the same. And we have to reject the attempts to make us part of it. We have to reject the attempts to assimilate into it. We have to reject the attempt to use our image to launder it. Reject it across the board. Monica had to drop because Monica had to go to her work, because capitalism continues unabated. We got to work day to day to pay our rent neat. So thank you so much, Monica, for joining us, and I will wrap up the show. So we talked about the problem of the politics of representation. We talked about why representation within capitalism and imperialism is a trap, why it's not helping us, why people are not on our side despite looking like us. We talked about what's going to happen ultimately if we do not deal with these politics of representation. They're going to put someone that occupies every possible intersection into a position of power, and that person is going to use that position to oppress everybody else that shares the intersection. Like, it's in the mail, like it's happening already. So that's what happens if we don't deal with this. So how do we deal with it? We must reject across the board assimilation into the US empire. This shit is not for us. This shit will never be for us. This shit, in fact, was born by desperately exploiting us and stealing our land. And so understanding that that was the birth, that's how it started, we have to understand that that's always what it's going to be. Putting us, like slapping us into that shit's not going to make us less racist. We have to tear it down and build something better. That's it. And the way that we can learn how to build something better, the way that we can learn that what something better can even look like, is to use our own history. African history is not the history of the American empire. African history predates the US empire by thousands of years. So does indigenous history. So does the history of colonized nations all around the world. We have our own stories. We have our own heroes. We are not of this place. This place was built on our backs. And so we say reject the mythology of the American empire, reject the history that they're trying to assimilate us into, find our own history and reclaim it and use that history as a weapon. Elevate people like Sarah Unya, elevate people like Sekou Touré, elevate people like Fannie Lou Hamer, Malcolm X, elevate the actual heroes of the struggle for African liberation, Find the representation you need there. Use the history of that struggle to fight this empire, to reject its attempts to make us part of it. That is what we have to do. And of course, if you are watching this show right now, if you are hearing me speak, and you are not active in an organization fighting for justice, fighting for liberation, we need you to get off the sidelines and into the fight today. Today, particularly if you are an African person or a colonized person, you have to understand that this place does not mean you well. This place in the long term is trying to kill you off. And the only way that we are going to be able to prevent that as colonized and oppressed peoples is if we are organized to defend ourselves and to build something better. And the way that we get organized is to join organizations fighting for justice. Join organizations fighting for liberation. If you're African, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Hit us up, aprp-intl.org, or email aprpnewmexico@gmail.com. Contact us and join us and help us fight to reclaim African history that is independent of the U.S. empire. African history, even within the U.S. empire, grew independently of this empire. There's no part of this is ours. We must reclaim our own history. We must join our organizations. We must build our own movements. We must reject the representation of capitalism and imperialism. What is Toby saying? Toby is saying is the research is just to confirm what we already know, which is that they wouldn't have gotten that far in American politics without being a neocolonial sellout in the first place. That is correct. That is correct. They would not, Kamala Harris would never have made it vice president if Kamala Harris had Assad's politics, y'all. If Kamala Harris talked like me, Kamala Harris would not have made it to the prosecutor, the lead prosecutor in the state of California. That shit would not have happened. But you have to understand that there's only a certain kind of way that you can rise up through the ranks of the U.S. state. There's only you have to have a particular kind of politics, no matter what identity you occupy. Word to AOC. You must be pro-empire. You must be pro-imperialism. You must be pro-capitalism to occupy any kind of position of leadership within this empire. So you should use that understanding to assess the people that you think are on your side within this U.S. government. But anywho, Prudence says, imagine standing Kamala when I can stand Winnie. Correct. Kamala Harris ain't look at Winnie Mandela. Look at the love that the masses of African people, oppressed and working class African people have for Mama Winnie Mandela. Look at Winnie Mandela's life and what she gave up for the liberation of our people. And then look at Kamala Harris. You know, did y'all watch the Zoom call with the civil rights leaders? It was Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the head of the Urban League, the head of the NAACP, Al Sharpton, a few other coons. So they had this meeting with Joe Biden where they were supposed to be giving him their policy demands, and then Joe Biden just yelled at them for 45 minutes, and then Kamala Harris was just quiet. And then one time Kamala Harris tried to speak, Joe Biden interrupted her, and she got quiet again. And I was like, damn girl, that's you did all that selling out, and that's what you gotta get interrupted by a segregationist in a meeting full of civil rights leaders. That's what you did all this for? That's what you were fighting for? Okay, girl. But she doesn't even really, she's an appendage of the Biden administration. She's just a tool in their toolbox. She doesn't really have any power independent of them. And she did all that selling out to get interrupted by Joe Biden on a Zoom call with Al Sharpton. Wow. But Winnie Mandela died a hero. Winnie Mandela is beloved by the masses of African people all around the world. Winnie Mandela refused to compromise about the principles of liberation, and her memory and honor lives to this day. I bet you Winnie Mandela would not let herself get interrupted by motherfucking Joe Biden. I bet you she wouldn't. But that's what Kamala Harris sold out for. Those are the people that capitalism said should be our heroes. These weak ass bitches. No, thank you. I will never stand Kamala Harris a day in my life. I will never aspire to be a Kamala Harris a day in my life. Not when people like Winnie Mandela exist. Not when people with Mawana of the APRP exist. Not when there's elder African women within the African People's Revolutionary Party that exists. I have no reason whatsoever to look up to a Kamala Harris or even aspire to be Kamala Harris. No, that girl is weak, a weak ass sellout. So anywho, we must reject assimilation to the empire. We must reclaim our history and use it as a weapon to find all the representation that we need in our own history of the struggle to be free. We must join revolutionary African people's organizations, and we must organize as colonized peoples to smash colonialism and smash imperialism. Don't try to diversify that shit. Tear it down. Just tear it down. We don't have to deal with it. The U.S. empire is actually quite new in the grand scheme of things. Your history, your actual history of your people is much longer and much older than this empire's. Like, oh my goodness, like we don't have to deal with this. Don't accept this shit. Don't diversify it. Don't integrate into it. Tear it the fuck down. That's the only way. Because in the long-term plan of capitalism, imperialism, is to exploit us until we all fucking die. Like, that's it. So don't try to diversify that shit. Don't try to rebrand it. Don't do it. Just fight for your own people. There's a person who is very annoying, who has a saying that I say all the time anyway. He says, believe in your people as much as you believe in the Democratic Party. Believe in your people as much as you believe in the Democratic Party. For fuck's sake. So please, join an organization if you're not in an organization and get off the sidelines. Smash imperialism. Do not try to diversify it. Moving right along. Thank y'all for your comments. Thank y'all for sticking with us through some technical difficulties. Toby says, yes, girl, people like you and me get weeded out with the quickness, and thank God, because we ain't trying to slaughter our own people, no way. Correct. Yeah, they wouldn't let me be attorney general of anything. They wouldn't let me run for vice president. Oh no. I probably couldn't even make it to like the Senate or the House, to be quite honest with you. Because I would be in there talking about burning down, and they'd be like, wow, she is not going to be controllable. So anyway, that was the political education section. We thank you so much for your comments and your participation and for bearing with us through some technical difficulties. We are still figuring it out, but we're doing it, making progress every day with the help of y'all. Next, we want to briefly talk about a situation of a comrade here in New Mexico chapter. We have repeated many times that these eviction moratoriums that on paper prevent people from being evicted but still allow them to be charged rent are not enough to address the housing crisis that has been created by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have a federal eviction moratorium. We have a New Mexico state level eviction moratorium. Despite these moratoriums, people are actually still being evicted. But also on top of that, even the people that are being saved from eviction are still being charged rent. And so people are facing a situation where, okay, the moratorium expires in March, and I'm going to owe like $10,000 in back rent. This is the situation we find ourselves in. These eviction moratoriums have never been a real solution to the actual problem created by housing under capitalism and this pandemic. So our chapter is all working class African people. We are not grant funded. We are not a nonprofit. We run this shit out of our pockets and from donations. So we are struggling just like y'all. And we have had multiple members, despite this eviction moratorium, be faced with the threat of eviction from their housing. During a pandemic, it is happening again. We have a comrade who is having to figure out how to pay back rent with no income coming in because eviction moratoriums do not stop the rent from being charged. So this comrade is trying to figure out what their housing is going to look like, how they're going to keep a roof over their heads during a pandemic. We are organizing to support them. We are reaching out to our community to help us support them because, like I said, we are coming out of pocket. We are working class African people. We have no grant funding. We have no corporate sponsors. We are not a nonprofit. So we need your support to help keep our comrade housed. If you have extra income, if you just got paid, if you're feeling generous, please Venmo at APRP-New Mexico. I'll put it in the chat. Or PayPal, aprpnewmexico@gmail.com. And anything you give at this time will be given to that comrade to keep them housed, We have seen across the nation, every time we see a spike in evictions, we see a spike in COVID infections because people are forced into living situations where they're not able to social distance or they are forced into the street. So evictions cause spikes in COVID infections. Evictions are inhumane at any time, but particularly during a global pandemic. And despite that fact, evictions are continuing unabated. So if you want to help our comrades stay housed so they can keep fighting for African liberation, please donate to the links that I just dropped in the chat. Again, that is at APRP-NM to Venmo us, and then APRPNewMexico@gmail.com if you want to PayPal us. And anything that you donate will go to keeping a roof over that comrade's head. We appreciate y'all so much. And also, beyond that, there are millions of people in the exact same situation. Millions of people in unsafe or unstable housing facing eviction, facing months and months and months of back rent. I read a recent study that said the average American family now owes $5,000 in back rent thanks to COVID-19 lockdown restrictions that are preventing them from being able to work. This is a situation for millions of people across the country. Despite that fact, the people in positions of power, the Biden administration, the House, the Senate, the Democrat or Republican parties, there is no long-term plan to address the situation. Millions of people are facing eviction when that federal eviction moratorium expires in March, and there is no long-term plan to address that. There's no long-term plan for rent forgiveness. And what that means is that we as people who rent, we as tenants, we as workers, we as African and colonized peoples must organize to demand what we need to survive this pandemic. They're not going to do the right thing. They are fighting over giving us $1,400. First they promised $2,000, then they said $1,400, then they said we'll negotiate that down, and it's still not coming. It's still not coming. It's still in process. So they're not going to do the right thing. They're not going to help us. They're in fact letting us die. We understand that's a situation, which means that we have a responsibility to organize to demand what we need to live. That's it. That's all. So if you're not an organization and you're an African person, a colonized person, a poor and working class person, like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? They're letting us die. We have to organize and demand what we need. We have to organize and take what we need. We cannot face a situation where 30 million people are houseless because Joe Biden is fucking useless. Like, no, we must fight for what we need. So please donate to that comrade once again to keep them housed. But also, we must build a movement to demand what people need to live during this pandemic, which means that people must be active in political organizations fighting for justice and building that movement. So just to wrap up the show, this has been Weekly Pan-African News, presented to you by All African People's Revolutionary Party in New Mexico. We do this every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. We try to keep it at 90 minutes, 60 minutes, but it varies. And we cover a different political education topic every week, which means we will be back next week on Thursday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to be talking about COVID-19 in these prisons and detention centers. So like we already have talked about vaccine apartheid and how it's basically like wealthy countries and people hoarding the vaccine, or poor people are like left to die. Well, that situation you can see clearly in how incarcerated people are being addressed during this pandemic. They are leaving those people in conditions where they cannot social distance, where they often cannot even wash their hands. They are leaving them to catch COVID and not giving them medical attention. And there is no plan in the majority of US states to vaccinate incarcerated people, let alone undocumented people in immigration detention centers. So we're going to be talking about all of that on the show next week, 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Also, every single Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, our comrade Ajamu and his daughter Shakura also do a political education seminar sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, they're going to be talking about these Hollywood movies that keep coming out about African revolutionaries and how they are misrepresenting the history of African revolution. They're going to be talking about, I believe, what's actually that called? The Amazon just put out? Oh, One Night in Miami. One Night in Miami. And they're going to be talking about, what's the other shit? Oh, American Skin. So One Night in Miami is the movie about a hypothetical conversation that might have happened in a Miami hotel between Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke, and someone else whose name I can't remember. And the depiction of Malcolm X in that movie is of like a completely irrational, like ultra left, light-skinned angry man, and they just like do disgrace to his legacy. So Jamu and Shakur are going to break that shit down and talk about why we cannot hope to see accurate depictions of African revolutionaries in Hollywood capitalist media. So thank you so much for joining us for the show today. If you are not in an organization fighting for justice, please join the organization, get off the sidelines. Once again, we are the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This will be the New Mexico chapter of the APRP. We are a revolutionary Pan-African socialist party with the political objective of Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa, and we say stay ready for revolution. Thank you so much and have a